Welcome back, baddies, to another episode of Sewing Samples. Today we're going to sew a plain open seam in a curve. Start by sketching out a rough curve on a piece of A4 paper. Smooth out the curves with a curved ruler. Draw on some notches with a few centimeters spacing in between. Make sure that you place your ruler angled like this so they match up on both sides when you sew. To trace your new pattern piece, place a new piece of paper on top and trace the curve, adding the notches. Draw on the seam allowance. You can easily do this by moving the ruler along the seam like I am doing here. Title your pattern piece. Note down how many times to cut it out. In this case, that is just once. Mark your grain line. That is the direction the pattern should lie on the fabric. Repeat the process for the other side of the curve. You should end up with two pattern pieces, the left and right side. If you want to double check that you have traced the curve correctly, line up the curve where it will be sewn and double check that your notches match. Iron your chosen textile. I'm again just using scrap pieces of toile for this, so it won't be perfectly smooth, but you'll get the idea. Pin the textiles matching the grain line with the selvage of the fabric like I showed you last time. Cut your notches at about 0.5 centimeters into your seam allowance. Mark the right and wrong side of the fabric in a way that makes sense to you. Place the right sides of the fabric together, lining up the notches and pin in place. When sewing a curve, I prefer to place my pins horizontally as it keeps the fabric from moving. Depending on how wild your curve is, you may want more or less pins. Remember to note down your sewing machine settings in case you need to adjust anything. Remember to lock your stitch in place with a back stitch and remove the pins as you sew. Depending on your curve, you might need to pull the fabric ever so slightly towards yourself in certain areas as you sew. You're aiming for the pieces to remain flat directly under the needle. Remember to backstitch again as you reach the end. Before ironing, you might notice some tension in the fabric in certain areas of your curve. To release some of that tension, cut out a V shape like this all the way down to the seam line, but be careful not to cut the actual seam. Iron the seam open and you have now sewn a plain open seam in a curve. Now that you know how to do that, make sure to practice it in a lot of different materials. Hit that follow button for more lessons and I'll see you back here next time. Thanks for watching. Bye!